my name's Caleb Winter. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a senior transportation planner with Metro in Portland, Oregon, where I manage our regional TSMO program. And I really thank NOCO and AASHTO for highlighting this work towards diversity, equity, and inclusion for TSMO. This is part of our region's TSMO strategy update that was adopted by our Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation last fall and by Metro Council just in early January. So we're happy to have this update. And really to receive this award is an opportunity to continue peer exchange on the topic of integrating equity and planning for operations. Chris?
Yeah, my name's Chris Gergich, also he, him pronouns. I'm an associate traffic engineer with Fair and Peers in our Seattle office, and I was the project manager for the strategy update. It's really been a pleasure getting to work with Caleb at Metro and Kate Freetag and Scott Turnway at ODOT, who are on our management team for this project.
So in 2010, that was Metro's first TSMO strategy, and we were following those regional policies at the time. But over the years, policies shift, and in 2016, Metro adopted an agency-wide policy called the Strategic Plan to Advance Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which led to community-focused work in developing the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan, which you see the cover of here. Community outreach generated goals, and the community prioritized equity, safety, climate, and managing congestion through policy and planning. Equitable transportation is now a core focus and is supported in the decision-making for how projects are evaluated for funding. So TSMO fits in as one strategy among the long-range regional transportation plan. So after our first 10 years with the TSMO plan, we have progressed, but now we're reframing how to build equity into the strategy. 10 years back, our vision statement included equity, but other than a few suggested projects, equity was not carried throughout the goals and proposed actions. So beginning our planning, we incorporated a broader, more diverse set of voices on our stakeholder advisory committee and in stakeholder surveys and workshops. Also, from the beginning of our task, first task was to establish an equity focus, and we did that in partnership with Fair and Peers. We looked back at the TSMO goals established in 2010, which were for safety, reliability, traveler information, and quality of life. And those, our 4 goals are still important today. But we have to acknowledge with equity planning how far we are from sharing the same quality of life in our region as disproportionate impacts persist. And we will either directly or inadvertently recreate those systems. National statistics underscore why equity is important. For example, households in the lower income bracket spend twice as much of their income on transportation than households in the top income bracket each year. And nearly a quarter of African-American households live without a car, are multiple times more likely to rely on transit, and are impacted significantly more when comparing fatality rates for pedestrians. So the 10-year planning horizon of this strategy gives us a chance to set off on a path to reverse disproportionate impacts. To kind of jump to key takeaways, which will kind of show more of the planning process, but I wanted to just get out, what's different between 2010 to 2020 TSMO versus this 2021 to 2031 TSMO. So, whereas we had equity among many outcomes before, now we have a voiced need from diversity, equity, inclusion conversations from our community-based organizations and more. We'd add equity to a project. Now we're really beginning a project with equity in mind. We had a multimodal approach to congestion. Now we're asking whose congestion and really acknowledging there are mobility and access issues across transportation systems. There, traveler information still featured. We had web, we had these digital assistants. Okay, maybe that's going back too far, but we also had a smartphone and on-street digital information. We still have those in addition to connected vehicles communicating to everything. And in equity, we need to think about smartphone and also where on-street information is most needed by communities who may not have the digital access. And then with demographic data, we are still looking at a lot of residential data for home locations. We really want to move towards origin to destination, so we really understand how people travel. Speaking of residential information, this is out of the 2018 Regional Transportation Art map of equity focus areas. This map shows shades of darker blue that are equity focus areas that include higher than average residents who are people of color, people with limited English proficiency, and people with low incomes. This was the starting place to prioritize funding and initiate discussions of projects that serve equity by residents. Equity policy guided the last round of TSMO projects and other projects. And it gives us kind of a quantitative or geographic picture. We want to really improve upon that. And what's missing are the community voiced needs. So that 2016 effort with Metro's change in policy or addition to policies, we had that 2016 strategic plan to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion with this statement: by addressing the barriers experienced by people of color, we will effectively also identify solutions and remove barriers to other disadvantaged groups. The idea of leading with race is start there and will improve, reduce delay for everyone. So asking questions identified by this equity tree, which you kind of see the image of here, helped us put a racial equity focus into the TSMO conversations as we drafted the strategy. And we'll show kind of a quick journey through this, and we'll give you the link later to look at it in more depth. But equity, like tree, builds from the roots up. These roots ask for context, choices, and voices involved in TSMO decision-making. Context is identifying the disparities and understanding their impact. Choices are understanding that choices are available or not available to the users and operators of the system. Voices ask who is being heard, who has a say in the TSMO solutions that we deploy, and prepares us for a better redefining a problem: who, what, and where, before taking steps towards a solution. This middle section, questions are asked for inclusivity and TSMO for professionals, both TSMO agency leaders and workforce in their representation of diversity and values of the region. Also questions about data. Do we have the data needed to understand or measure equity? Is there a gap? Does the TSMO solution collect the data we need? And then at the top, we're defining steps towards a solution. We're better prepared for implementation. And are going to be evaluating and be accountable to the results. So does the solution create, reinforce, or remove barriers to travel for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and people with low incomes, BIPOC? And to be accountable, we need to ask, did the outcomes help or have unintended consequences despite our best efforts? And then what will we do to recover from that? So that's the quick tour, and I'll turn it over to Chris, who's going to go into just overview of the planning process that stemmed from this equity focus. Chris?
Great. Thank you, Caleb. Yeah, so as Caleb mentioned, that's task one on our project was to develop a tree. Can you go to the next slide there? Great. So that question then becomes, how did that shape the development of the TSMO strategy overall? So the 2022 strategy starts with a vision statement, and that's shown here. We held stakeholder workshops to craft the vision and goals. And we used the equity tree to focus that conversation on both what we wanted to achieve and who is most affected by the types of problems that TSMOs can help to solve. Uh, as you can see, the final vision statement starts with the traditional outcomes found in the TSMO strategy: reliability, agility, and connectedness. But then goes on to very explicitly call out one of TSMO's key goals is to eliminate disparities experienced by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and people with lower incomes. Next slide, please. 6 TSMO goals were created from the feedback of our diverse stakeholder advisory committee and management team. You can see these 6 goals incorporate key regional policy outcomes. Some of these goals reflect more traditional TSMO values of safety, collaboration, reliability, and connectivity. But for the goal, keep everyone free from harm, we wanted to make sure to incorporate a Vision Zero policy, but expand our understanding of safety to include the harm that comes from experiences our residents have shared traveling at night: not feeling comfortable riding transit or waiting for the bus, or even hearing racist and sexist remarks while walking. We are asking our region's planners, engineers, and operators what are the specific ways we can manage the transportation system to keep everyone free from harm, not just bodily harm, but ensuring a sense of safety and comfort while traveling. For example, if we're making an intersection safer with a Vision Zero project, do we also have the opportunity to improve lighting and connectedness to adjacent transit stops? Next slide, please. We're going to go deeper into the goal to eliminate disparities, focusing on objectives. Rather than thinking about simply what is the information and where is it being shared and by what technology, the focus shifts to who is being reached and how TSMO can remove barriers to accessing the information. Does someone need a smartphone or a bank account to access a specific travel mode? Should information be provided in multiple languages or in a new or different location to reach communities that are not currently being reached? The next two objectives help first identify past and existing disparities and how that transportation system has been planned and experienced by BIPOC and people with low incomes. The fourth objective is to reduce the cost burden experience so that all people can comfortably and easily travel in the region. Go into another, thank you. Another key indicator, performance indicator, which is a fairly standard one here, is total crashes normalized by the vehicle miles traveled per capita. But we wanted to think through the equity tree, and we asked the question, who is most affected and what data is really needed to understand the question? You'll see this resulted in exploratory metrics where we called out crash demographics and risk, as well as the average miles biked or walked. To explore further, we specified crash demographics to determine who is being involved in the crashes. There were many discussions about how this data could be collected and who would be collecting it. This led us to creating actions around researching data sources and developing policies for processing this information. Similarly, we developed an action to measure and understand crash risk, specifically for the equity focus areas, and to measure average miles walked and biked so that we can better understand the true rates of pedestrian and bicycle related collisions normalized by the active miles traveled instead of vehicle miles traveled. And then some of the actions, a series of the actions were developed from each objective, and each team, and then the team worked to group those actions into similar packages. The packages closely mirrored the equity tree. There are several actions that fall under the planning umbrella to get a better understanding of the who, what, and where questions. Additionally, we have several actions that develop infrastructure and capabilities through a series of related steps to develop solutions. Lastly, we identified a number of actions that evaluate our progress and hold the region accountable for creating an opportunity to listen to the communities impacted. Caleb is going to go through a couple examples.
Oh, I think for time, we'll go through just the one in the middle. But one example under concepts, capabilities, and infrastructure is the action to consider how to better deploy regional traveler information systems in an equitable way. So starting with BIPOC and people with low income and limited English proficiency communities. So one of the specific outcomes this action identified was to evaluate a method for deploying traveler information in a way that does not require personal smart technology, so such as putting screens in buildings, major destinations, and regional centers, and obviously having a conversation in communities as to where that's needed most. So many more. We'll share the link. Wanted to round out, that now that we've had this adopted TSMO strategy, we're putting it into a work plan, into action. So looking ahead, we created a work plan for transport. That's our region's TSMO and ITS committee. This screenshot shows just a snippet of that work plan for new multimodal integrated corridor management data sharing task force. One of the groups will form to complete actions identified, several of the actions in the TSMO strategy. So across the gold bar, you can see how we've identified a path to implementation, leadership, and a timeline, which in this case relates to a second phase of regional disaster preparedness. So we'll follow the lead of that group as well. And then if I had more to show of this work plan, below you'd see suggested agenda items for upcoming meetings and a place to track our progress. Above this is a common language description of the task force purpose, who is involved, and something we can share and be transparent about what these group efforts are whenever someone's interested. So to bring it full circle on how to integrate equity, we also have questions from the equity tree to keep them in the front of our minds as the task force meets. So yeah, we really thank everyone for attending today. Many thanks to Chris and all the staff at Fair and Peers who helped. We also had the help of FHWA early on in our strategy planning. FHWA operations supported an emerging mobility workshop that was our biggest online stakeholder workshop in the series. Chris, any last words?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Caleb. I really appreciate it. And to everyone at ODOT and Metro on our management team, they were all very open to changing the narrative around equity and transportation in TSMO. And we were really proud to see this effort among the case studies. We're happy to make ourselves available to discuss and answer any questions. And thank you to this group for recognizing those efforts.